we have to jump in and talk about leaks regarding Destiny 2 content. Of course, in the past couple of weeks, we have seen a significant number of leaks, or should I say, supposed leaks, about future content that we're going to get in the game. And one of the interesting things about some of the leaks that we've had recently is that despite a bit of a consensus from a lot of people in the community that the leaks do look fairly illegitimate, we've equally seen them gain quite a lot of traction despite that question over their legitimacy, right? And you guys who've been watching this channel for quite some time, you know that we talk about future content that's coming up in the game. We do cover leaks quite a lot here. But at the same time, with some of the recent leaks, I've had a lot of comments from folks saying, why aren't you talking about X leak that happened a couple of days back? And this is why I think it's good to jump in, talk about the legitimacy of some of the stuff that's coming out at the moment, but also to take a bit of a look at the history of leaks regarding future Destiny content, and a fairly significant change that has happened over the past year especially around how we actually get Destiny leaks and where they're coming from. Since we cover a lot of this content on the channel, I wanted to give you a bit of my perspective on a lot of what we're currently hearing about, as well as taking that look back at how leaks have changed over time. One of the really big ones recently would be Destiny 2 collapse. We got this 2 or 3 weeks ago, I believe, but the interesting thing is that in the time since this one dropped, we have had a whole series of pretty questionable leaks that don't have a whole lot of foundation to them. Collapse specifically, or the leak for Collapse, suggested that Europa, as well as the Finality, and the Pyramid Ship are going to be locations for the Fall expansion. Of course, a lot of these leaks that we have had correlate to things that Anon the 9 said previously, around about 2 years ago now. And according to Anon the 9, these were the things that Bungie were looking at as kind of concepts for what they could do at the beginning of Destiny 3. And so the recent leaks claim that essentially Bungie are working with those concepts, the stuff that they were going to use for a Destiny 3, and it's now going to become future Destiny 2 content. And that sounds pretty legitimate, right? Especially with the potential that we're not going to see a Destiny 3 for quite some time. We know that things have changed at Bungie, and specifically they have said themselves that the plan for the foreseeable future is to support Destiny 2. And so the idea that they may take stuff they were working on for Destiny 3 and bring it into D2 is completely logical. And that gives some of these leaks a pretty good foundation, right? Especially when they're talking about pyramid ships, this new darkness enemy, and that's a seed, an idea that was planted in the mind of Destiny community members quite some time ago. And in a way, it does mean that it's pretty easy to build upon that idea because it's so logical. It's practically a fact, and one that we've been discussing for quite some time. And of course, the gameplay representation of that from Bungie began with the Queen's Court in Destiny 2 especially. That's where things started to build up, outside of loose teasers, like the ending for D2's vanilla campaign. And so again, the pyramids are coming. But of course, Destiny 2 Collapse, or the leak for D2 Collapse, kind of collapsed in itself, because the leaker claimed that the artwork they provided as early concept art for essentially a cover for this expansion, right? There were questions about its legitimacy in the first instance, but then folks discovered that the background used for the image was actually something that you could find on Google. And as we've discussed, that really isn't something that's very likely to happen with a Bungie artist, right? Plus, by the time you were looking at actual concepts for a cover for a release, you'd have a lot of assets that were gonna look a hell of a lot more like your actual product already, right? You wouldn't need to go looking for stuff on Google for rough ideas at that point. But according to the leak, the artwork came alongside it. And so probably the more legitimate sounding leak that we've had recently was torn down by the fact that it had that artwork. And then we've had another one very recently. So this is Destiny 2 Crypt of Terrors. And again, the artwork really does not help here. We can see an official Bungie image, and this is a concept piece for Europa. This one's existed for years and years, the same as the Pyramid Ship image that was Bungie concept art. But another interesting thing about the leaks that we've been getting recently is that they claim to come from Bungie developers. So when we look at Crypt of Terrors, which I think really doesn't look very legitimate, right? The artwork says it, the name kind of says it, but here we have it. As a developer for Bungie, I'm here to give you a little behind the scenes look at what's being added to the game. Apparently Twilight Garrison and Vex Mythoclast is coming back, as well as Fatebringer. I find it really quite amusing as well because the person writing this particular supposed leak actually uses language very much like what Bungie do. We hear you, and we plan to address this issue in the Crypt of Terrors. Also things like, many players feel their time is wasted hunting powerful and pinnacle gear, or increasing their artifact power, and that's why, in Crypt of Terrors, the entire power grind will be changed in significant ways. Obviously, this isn't an actual attack on whoever's written this, right? There is an element of all of these leaks that a lot of players in the community have discussed is kind of like fan fiction. And I absolutely get that. It's really exciting to think about this stuff. We love speculating. And I think Destiny players have a fantastic imagination that's actually been fed by the universe that Bungie have created, right? That in itself is really fun and really awesome. But at the same time, as I said, with a lot of leaks kind of gaining traction recently, I'm personally quite surprised that it's happening. And again, I think the correlation between content that we really know about and has been teased to us in the game and via Bungie and via a very legitimate leaker a couple of years ago who did tell us a lot of stuff that ended up dropping in Destiny 2 over the course of year 2, it's kind of built this confidence, right, that yeah, we do get a lot of very legitimate leaks. For me personally, that's why I haven't been especially covering a lot of the stuff that's come out recently. And so to kind of explain that from my personal perspective before we look at a bit of a history of leaks. If we look back to before Forsaken came out, in fact many weeks before Forsaken was revealed, Anon the 9 leaked information about the alternate subclass paths that we were going to be getting. They said we're not going to get full new subclasses, but we're going to get a new path on the tree, and they essentially broke down all of the abilities that we would get. When Anon the 9 made that leak, I didn't speak about it whatsoever. And it's essentially the same thing that's happened with these leaks here. The reason for it is that at the time there was just no way to prove that that source was remotely legitimate. It's the kind of content that I may put into another news video, right? Hey, so we may have a bit of a leak here. These are the details, but it certainly isn't something that I want to sell as huge leak, because we just don't know that it's legit, right? Of course, further down the road, when I'd followed Anon the 9's content and the things that they were talking about, it put me in a different position, and I was one of the people kind of paying more attention to that as a content creator at the time. It put me in a position where I could kind of say, hey, well, this guy keeps getting stuff right. And in terms of who Anon the 9 was, I honestly have no idea. The rumors, around the circles that were kind of close, were that the leaks essentially came from somewhere inside of Activision. That's what I heard. That's the best information I possibly have about where those leaks could have come from. And so a really interesting thing that's kind of happened over the past year is that type of really remote leak that just sort of springs out of nowhere, but actually turns out to be true, that type of leak hasn't really been happening since Anon the 9 went away. It also doesn't appear to have really been happening since Bungie split with Activision. Hey, I'm not suggesting anything funky here, but it could potentially correlate to things that have been said in the past. These are complete and total rumors, as are any leaks about Destiny until they're proven to be a real thing. And so when we look at the legitimate sources of Destiny 2 leaks, at the minute, we're talking about a lot of stuff that's been data mined in the game. That's kind of the current conversation. We totally have data miners who are just as prolific, but they're actually lifting information out of the game or out of the API in one way or another and then publishing it. And we saw that kind of leak happen in the week before Forsaken dropped. The reason for that is that Bungie had loaded data into the game, right? So we could see quests in the database. The savvy data miners could look into the game files. And that's pretty much what we've seen around all of the seasonal content drops since that time. And it's exactly what we're seeing this season as well, right? With the exception of glitches, the information that we have comes from the database. And so database leaks have for a long time been one of the most prolific and reliable sources of information about upcoming content. And of course, stuff that's in the database isn't always reliable. And so data miners, or people like me when we're making content about it, you have to take the time and try and put the pieces together, right? To actually be able to see, this looks like a piece of content, not just a scrap of something. Because there is a definite difference. It's pretty interesting to talk about, this content that we shouldn't be talking about. And I know that it isn't stuff that everyone in the community loves. There are plenty of people who aren't particularly keen on any kind of leaks or spoilers especially. But equally, there has always been a hunger and a thirst from Destiny players, in a similar way that there is for the loot in the game, right? There is a significant number of people who are very willing to find out secrets, be told secrets, and all that kind of stuff. It's a different kind of player empowerment or an interest for a certain type of player. But outside of data mining, what have our legitimate sources been? Well, as far as we know, Anon the 9, and we had a fair amount of correct information about Forsaken, but then also drops that we would get in the annual pass before all of those leaks kind of died down and went away. Outside of that source, one of the other primary sources has been Jason Schreier from Kotaku, especially historically. The first legitimate leak that we had after Destiny 2 came out was for Curse of Osiris, and this one dropped via Kotaku. And Eric Osborne from Bungie actually came out eventually and said Curse of Osiris is not a leak, it's real. So they actually confirmed that one to be a thing. And then between the time that we had Curse of Osiris with that legit leak and then Warmind, we did have a few pretty sketchy leaks. So we had Destiny 2, Gods of Mars, returning to a new area, the Frigid Vale on Mars, and the mysterious Clovis Grove concealing Charlemagne's vault beneath the surface. Of course, that wasn't the case. And the community had loosely guessed that Mars was going to be a focus because the terrain around the Warmind in the promo image looked very much like Mars. We discussed that before the DLC dropped, many months before it dropped. And so once again, people writing this stuff were taking legitimate strands, ideas and conversation from in the community, and then augmenting it with stuff that obviously didn't turn out to be real. Do you guys by any chance remember another leak that we had shortly after that, which was the Heralds of Nezarec? I remember a lot of folks talking about that. That one claimed that a data mine had said that the D2 expansion would be Heralds of Nezarec and introduce a new location on Enceladus. That must have been a supposed data mine because, yeah, I'm pretty sure that data was never in the game. But shortly after that, there was also the Summoning of the Nine, the supposed fall DLC we were going to get. And of course, Nezarec and Summoning of the Nine never turned out to be a thing. But with the exception of maybe a couple of other similarly illegitimate leaks, the next thing that really piqued people's interest was that little leak from Anon the Nine about new subclass trees for Forsaken, as well as the fact that we get 2 destinations, and Bungie were planning to reveal all of this shortly after the release of Season, a few weeks down the road. The very curious thing about Anon the Nine posts is that they tended to go directly to Destiny Reddit pages. Also, some of them were referenced from Discords and things like that. All of the Forsaken subclasses, locations, the fact that we were going to have an annual pass for the very first time with multiple content drops throughout the year, and then the supposed conversation about the future of D3 development. Yeah, these were definitely the most legitimate leaks we had about Destiny content that didn't come out of the database or from Kotaku. Another key thing that I would point out about Heralds of Nezarec, Gods of Mars, Summoning of the Nine, the Crypt of Terrors, and Destiny 2 Collapse is that all of these leaks, as far as I know, have come from 4chan posts and not from other sources. And so, while you definitely can get some legit stuff on those threads, in terms of Destiny content on the most part, it has not been a very reliable place to look for Destiny leaks. So guys, I thought that was an interesting breakdown, a bit of a history of leaking in Destiny, where the leaks tend to actually come from, and ultimately outside of the database, very few sources of legitimate leaks about Destiny content, right? You had Kotaku and Anon the Nine in year 1 and a little bit of year 2, and in the time since then, pretty much all of the content that has been leaked is content out of the database, which is really when you're talking about stuff that you're going to get in a few weeks' time as part of a season, right? As opposed to, hey, this big expansion's going to happen in 4-5 months. So considering, yes, it is stuff that we touch on quite a bit here on the channel, I thought it would be interesting at least to go through it in a bit more detail, give you guys some of my perspectives, but also some of the things that I've learned about these kind of content leaks surrounding Destiny content. So, of course, there are plenty of other people who pay a lot of attention to this stuff. So give us your thoughts about it down below. Also give us your thoughts on the kind of fan fiction element of it. I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of a different video today. And if you have, a rating below very much helps me out. We'll see what we get in that fall expansion, man. We're gonna get pyramids. We're gonna get a new location. Or at least I really hope we are. Another enemy race is entirely possible at this point. All of the things that we know, once again, they're the conversation that kind of drive these leaks and people expand on them and create new things around them. We're gonna get some kind of variation of it if we're lucky. Anyway guys, if you want to keep up to date with more Destiny content and you do enjoy the conversation, feel free to hit that subscribe button. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have an awesome day.